Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a very special guest on. We got Dr. Heather Lynn, somebody I've wanted to get on for a few years, and people have suggested her to come on the show for the last few years. So, finally making it happen. But before I introduce her, let me introduce the other rejects that we got here. And we got my man, the Headless Giant. What is going on, sir?
How you doing? You can find me at the Headless Giant on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, and I've got shows that span from Monday through Friday. If you check them out, I've got Alchemy Mondays with Eros. I've got 777 with Nick at on Tuesdays. Today we were supposed to get some sort of Rustic Gods going on sometime late tonight, but then on Thursday we've got the mailbag. So if you've got any sort of occult / esoteric experiences you want to send me, that's the Headless Giant Podcast at gmail.com, and we will get those out there. So thank you. Also, the Trilogues with Ethan on Sunday at 10:30. So check it out.
Awesome. You know, the guest we had on yesterday during the day, Mariana Lewis, she has a show, Sora Mystica. They do almost the same thing where they have a show where they read like people's dreams and try to interpret them and stuff. I was like, oh, nice. Sounds familiar. Yeah. It's pretty cool. My man, Brandon, what is going on, sir? How are you? Thank you for making it.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me, Nick. As always, love being on the Rejects, a reject myself. Everyone, make sure you head over to Magus in the Media after this. Subscribe, like, and share. We break down myth, meaning, magic, philosophy, and all the stories that you love. I just had on Scarlet Imprints. That video just went live yesterday. Please check it out. They are brilliant. The conversation was amazing. Tonight, I will be doing at around the 6 o'clock time my own live stream where I talk about how deep we are within Plato's cave and then how to help us get out of it. So I break down not only the Republic and Plato's cave, but I'm going to be then intermixing all the crazy shit that I've bookmarked that has been going on in the world and how those are but shadows in the cave. So please, everyone, check it out. Instagram, X, but YouTube is the main source, and that's where the live stream will be. I'm excited to be here with Dr. Heather Lynn.
Listen, no, thank you for making it. I really look forward to this cave that you're going to be talking about, Plato's cave. Yeah. Working on Plato right now, and I think I had told you, I think I already asked you, I'm going to get you, Headless, Eros, or maybe I don't know anybody else on the show and actually talk about Plato's works. So that's awesome how we're all kind of like doing that at the same time. Great stuff. Let's be in the air, you know?
It's definitely in the air.
Yeah. All right. And finally, the guest, we got Dr. Heather Lynn. And she is a historian and independent researcher who's built a public profile around hidden history questions, how ancient myth, symbolism, and contested artifacts shape modern narratives about who we are and where we came from. In her own framing, she approaches the past through an interdisciplinary lens that blends contextual analysis, comparative symbolism, and cultural history. She is also the host of Midnight Academy podcast and has written a few books. She has the Anunaki Revelation, The Anunaki Connection, Evil Archaeology, and Baphomet Revealed. And today we're going to talk about the Anunaki Revelation. So please, Heather, let everybody know what your deal is and where they can find all your stuff.
Oh, well, where you can find my stuff is kind of everywhere. You could just start at my website. It's www.drheatherlynn.com, and you'll find links to everything there. But I'm so glad to be here. It's so exciting. Yes, I love the myth and the breakdown of that. I'm gonna have to catch that. That sounds really great.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Are you into Plato's works, Plato's stuff?
I am very much. Nice. Yes, I used to teach about Plato's cave in my humanities class, and that's a great starter for people to like break out of the matrix, not to sound cliche, but it's just to introduce young people to that.
Yeah When I first, I'll be honest, it wasn't until recently that I really got into a lot of his stuff, and I was like looking at it and I was like, yo, this guy sounded like he was a conspiracy theorist back then. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the stuff we're saying now. Like, you're buying into this bullshit. It's not real.
Yeah,
like it's a movie.
Yeah,
exactly.
I
thought it was pretty cool. I was like, wow, this guy was like spitting some crazy shit then.
Yeah, he was. Well, that and his works on Atlantis.
Yes.
So.
The Timaeus is huge, talking about the demiurge, the craftsman creating the world.
Yeah. So been doing a deep dive on that lately after having Jack Kelly on my show to talk about the Atlantis puzzle, and he sort of, I don't know if you've had him on or not, but definitely a good guest. He went on a deep dive on Plato and found Atlantis, or so he thinks, as everybody thinks. But
Oh, I'll have to get in touch with him.
yeah,
After
no, it's good stuff. He has a documentary out too. Highly recommend.
It's the most written about topic in history. I think a lot of people don't realize that, but Atlantis has been around so long that it's been the most written about topic ever. So,
Oh wow, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
So, Heather, what got you into what you do? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you get there?
It's a weird story. I think I was meant to do it. I joke though, like I didn't choose the Anunnaki life. The Anunnaki life chose me. I was a really weird kid, as you could imagine. And so I actually ran away from home though, and ended up kind of driving across country before van life was cool, and stayed everywhere, did everything. And this was back before there was podcasts and things to listen to. So I was stuck with overnight radio. And I got really into Art Bell, as you could imagine.
I knew it.
Yeah, always origin story. But I used to go and listen to these shows and hear people that were just like so interesting and pretty wild. Everything from someone maybe more mainstream is like Michio Kaku to like a guy who claims he's a dolphin, and I'm like, I'm here for it. So it was great. I loved it. There's only so much like middle America music you can listen to. I mean, I love Bob Seger, but it's just like, and Bad Company, it was like dominating the airways. I'm like, okay, I need some intellectual stimulation, and that's where I found it. And I used to actually think, how cool would it be to know some of these people, just to have conversations that were just wild and out there. But I just, I was busy surviving, so I didn't really revisit it or anything. And over the years, I had a lot of misadventures, and I just ended up knowing that I wanted to go back to school because I was a good student. And, I left because I had a messed up home life. So it wasn't that I was not wanting to do the right thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to school. I went to a community college and thought I'm going to do the right thing and go get a degree in like business or something. I don't know. Because I had worked in fast food, and, if you're like a homeless teenager, what kind of life are you having? So I'm working at the mall, I'm working at fast food, and I go back to the community college and, kind of started my journey there, had some ups and downs, but there was a point, I had a lot going on, but there was a point where I had a professor who was like, this writing is really good and you should pursue this. And it was my art history professor. And I thought, I don't know what I would do with that. I don't know what kind of career or vocation I could do. But she's like, well, don't worry about it. And she was so quirky. I just loved her. I wanted to do what she did. She once recommended the movie Caligula to the class. Like, I don't know if like Caligula, if you're familiar with that movie. So yeah, she was like, this is a great academic piece that shows the real. And I'm like, really? So I go, and this was back when you could rent movies, and the cover of it looked legitimate, looked kind of intriguing. I get it home and I pop it in, and I'm like, okay, this professor's recommending it. And all of a sudden it's like paper mache dicks and weird like 70s porn stuff. And I'm like, okay, but now I know a lot about this professor. She was still pretty cool, and she was just quirky and had a lot of adventures in that. But I ended up just following my passion, so to speak, and got into archaeology and that sort of thing. At that point, I was like, I'm just going to keep going and make a go of this. And I started working in the archaeology lab and taking it more seriously. And I was really, really like genuine in my pursuit because of my background. I thought, here, I'm doing the right thing. And I was very naive as well. And so I get very much involved in grant writing and working in community research and all of this, right? And it was starting through that I found so much corruption that I just thought, this is weird. At a small school in Cleveland, I'm like, why are we having so much corruption? And so, for instance, I had successfully secured a grant for our summer project that was supposed to be a continuation of when we were working with students for teaching them about their history and urban studies and this sort of thing. And then I found out like, oh, well, we weren't really going to use that money for the program. It was just like supplemental income for the professors over the summer. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I have thought that about being done in other areas.
Yeah, little things like that. And then, going up further, there was a whole like scandal, and it just like so many things. And I just got disenchanted because my view was they were always telling me things like, you need to settle down with this. Because like, for instance, I went to museum day. It was supposed to be a thing where at the museum, we got people interested in archaeology, maybe to sign up for a class or something. And they said, well, you can take care of the marketing, right? And I'm like, sweet. So I got like all sorts of flyers and stuff, and they saw it and they reprimanded me for making it too sensationalist. They said, we need to, yeah, they were like, we don't want to look like some Indiana Jones thing or whatever. And I'm like, you're meeting people where they are. They're like young people and whatever. In the archaeology course that I took, the very first one, mind you, our first assignment was they put up all these names of individuals on the board and said, okay, we're going to pick one of these topics and debunk it. And it was like people I recognized from, of course, like listening to Art Bell. And I thought, well, I don't even know how to debunk anything because I don't know what I'm doing. But that was fine, still going along. But I just noticed that they were very much more interested in securing themselves in this like careerism kind of path. Like it was about credentialism and all of that. And I thought, this is just cynical. And so I got a little disenchanted. And because I was still young and kind of in that runaway spirit, I thought, screw this, I'm out of here. But before I did, I thought, I don't know why, but I thought I'm going to email Michael Cremo. If anyone's familiar with Michael Cremo, he wrote the book Forbidden Archaeology, and that was a really good book to me. I was like, this is great stuff. So I emailed him, did not think he'd email back. And he did. And he gave me some really just serious advice that was very paternal and responsible. Now looking back, like he told me, you have two choices. If you stay, you can do meaningful research, but push the envelope ever so slightly. Or if you leave, you can go, batshit crazy, essentially, if we can use profanity on the show. And he's like, you can do that, but just know that it's basically just pseudoarchaeology. You'll be challenged and all of that. And I thought, I think it's better if I just cool my jets and stay in school, because obviously I need to even know, how can I debunk some pseudoarchaeologist if I don't know archaeological methodology or anything like that? And likewise, how can I propose that anything's real if I don't have the methodology? So it was just, I kind of came to my senses and thought I need to stay in and just do my thing and, not give up. And I think he was just one of those moments where, just like the professor encouraging me, I had someone encouraging me to go on. And so my goal was to become a community college professor so I could do the very same thing for people. And I did. And that was very meaningful. So it all came full circle, and I was doing my thing, I'm researching, and I didn't really think about doing something with the Anunnaki or any of this because it was sort of out there. I wasn't really into Stargates and science fiction. But then I started writing a blog, and it was about strange archaeological finds, archaeology news and whatnot. So people had my information. And one day I got an email from somebody who claimed they were from Iraq, and they were asking me for my help. And I'm like, help with what? I'm in my pajamas in Cleveland, Ohio. I can't help you. I don't know what you're talking about. But I thought, and I looked at what they were discussing, and it had come from a press release about an archaeological excavation that was going on in Iraq, which had been a big deal at the time when it happened, because so it was a big deal because the wars and everything, they weren't able to go in there. And so they were doing this big excavation, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, maybe I can find out more. And so I researched who was involved, and I got a hold of the professor at the University of Manchester, and I asked if I could have an interview for my blog. And they said, sure. And so they said, just submit the questions ahead of time. And I said, great, I will do that. Then I went onto my Facebook and I said, hey, y'all, I'm going to be asking questions. Any questions? And the overwhelming response was about this Anunnaki stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just throw that in there. Why not? I didn't say like anything outlandish. I just said, hey, this is something people are interested in. Can you address it? When I submitted the questions, I was completely ghosted. I was like, okay, I get it. But why'd you ghost me? Could you just not say, well, maybe take that question out? Or could you just not ghost me? So then I started thinking, wait a minute, I got to find out more. And I couldn't find out much more. And I thought, well, what do you do? Right? In this situation, you follow the money. So I started researching who funded this, what was going on really behind the scenes, if they weren't going to be helpful. And I started to discover something pretty wild, which was that their main funding source was a petroleum company, big oil, and also banking families. And one of them in particular, a big funder, was heir to the Thyssen family dynasty, whose family bankrolled the Nazis and all of this, and were good friends with the Bushes. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But what was really interesting about him was he was known to be a collector of Mesopotamian artifacts and other artifacts. He was the second biggest collector of antiquities, second to only Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, and I just, that all kind of swirled in, and I'm like, what is this? This sounds like wild. This sounds like, we got Rothschilds, we got bloodlines, we got Stargates and tablets, and surely this is just not, I mean, this is just like what I've experienced in life, which is just corruption, money, banking, fine. The deeper I went, though, it just took hold of me, and I realized whether or not there is such a thing as, say, a Stargate, or that people went in and looted for whatever, none of those concrete answers really kept me. It was more the quest of wanting to know the truth, but also if it was something that people with means had enough interest in to spend their money and pursue and go to great lengths to even cover up, there's something there. And whether or not it's a so-called real phenomenon that they're after, I thought it was very important to find out what they believed, at least, because it was like, it reminded me of the Nazis, where, whether or not someone believes in Vril or anything like that, they did. And there were a lot of individuals in the Nazi party who were practicing a lot of different, things. And it would have probably been good for people to know that. So yeah, that was just kind of, I guess, a long story, but that's what led me into how I went into a basically unconventional path. And I've done that now for a long time. And the rabbit hole just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder. And so I've been hooked ever since.
I love the story.
Yeah.
Even with, did you ever look into that ziggurat of ore? It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It is definitely. We, when we were over there, when the United States had gone over there, we had Robert Gates, who was very interested in the site, and they were guarding it. And I mean, and you could say, well, of course, I mean, it's our responsibility as, people who are invading to at least protect the cultural resources there. Sure. But at the same time, we looted the museum, and that's on record. That's fact. We were convicted of doing such. So it's like, okay, sure. I'm going to believe that now. I'm going to believe that they were just protecting assets, sure, for culture, for humanity, because they're just so worried about, what we know and what we believe. And it's ridiculous now. So of course, now I'm interested and have been, what are they hiding? Why did they loot? What's going on? And I think the most interesting part about the looting of the museum really was that the things that they stole were not things that would have been necessarily valuable on the black market. The things that would have been very valuable, they kept there. And so some arguments for that were, well, it's because they would have been able to trace them. So if you did have it on the black market, then they would know. But it was a strange thing. They took tablets, and it's important too to remember that tablets, for people who aren't into this, it might be easy to think tablets are these huge things like the old movie, Charlton Heston, Moses holding up these big tablets or something like that. But these tablets are very small. And so you can carry out bags of thousands of them. And that's what they did.
Well, I had a Chaldean friend of mine say that the Bush family specifically comes through the line of Asher, the Asher family from Asher Banipal. So he believes that they're actually from ancient Babylonian bloodlines, which would make sense with the tablets, because most of these tablets are sort of like ownership claims. And a lot of these tablets being ownership claims, if you're going to collect anything, that's the thing that you want. That's like the ancient form of, stock market. They've got these tablets that claim ownership over lands and properties and all sorts of stuff back then. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very true. That and bloodlines. So the idea of being related to them at all, and the divine right of kingship. So there's a lot of individuals from different families who want to trace their lineage to these lands so that they can A, have the lands, B, stake claim to all of the things on the lands, and C, somehow feel they have the moral high ground or karmic high ground to rule over others and subjugate people. So yeah, kind of dark.
One thing I did notice.
Yeah, very dark. It's interesting. Then
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it relates to somebody put it in the chat, but it's also like the WikiLeaks thing with Hillary Clinton and them going over there and trying to find the tombs of Gilgamesh, as well as one of the more conspiratorial things being that we went there because of WMDs, but technically those WMDs were actually stargates.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to it's so easy to put out one message by saying no, WMDs are whatever weapons the military industrial complex is trying to make us think it is. But when actuality, they're not lying per se, but they're just covering it over with levels of abstraction to disprove or prove whatever their narrative is.
Right. Right. No, that's a very good point. That was something that when I wrote the first book about the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki connection, that was my first, I think, attempt to really look at the phenomena. And as somebody who wasn't really coming in as a fan of Zecharia Sitchin, or even the camp that argued against him, like Michael Heiser and individuals like that, I wanted to, I guess, investigate from the ground up. And so the book kind of logs that journey. So I kind of present a lot of different things in it, like, well, this is what these people think, this is this theory, and here are all the connections I'm seeing. And as you could imagine, and I didn't even mean to do this in a cheap way, but I ended up with more questions than answers at the end. And that led me to have to then keep on studying this. Eventually led to the newest book. And that's because I started with more of a materialist lens, like, are there stargates, like physical stargates? What's out there? Also, taking accounts from people, what did they believe? Looking at it from all of those angles. But the more I, no pun intended, but dug into it, the more I found there was some abstract level to it that was beyond just stargates in a physical form. And that's what led me to, I guess, the revelation in the book. And I guess I don't want to say maybe accused. I'll use the word accused because some people are hostile about these things. In the past, I had been accused of riding the fence on the topic because people have this cult of personality when it comes to Sitchin. It's like, oh, you don't believe that, there was a rogue planet and everyone got into 1960 style spaceships and flew down here and took gold, etc. Then how dare you? It's like, okay, well, hold your horses here. Let's update our firmware. It's been old, long time since Sitchin wrote this anyway. And then there's the people that are like, well, there's nothing to it. It's just basically myths, and that's fine. And that's great. Fine. But I didn't take a hard stance because I didn't have one other than Sitchin. While I may not have agreed with all of his translations, he did do a good service for everybody and getting people to know these things. Just like Eric von Daniken, love him or hate him, he kind of put these ideas out there in the world for people to question. And I think that's important because it's just been since, I can't even believe some of the students that I had in my class. I would ask them, how many have heard of the Sumerians? And nobody had. And it wouldn't be until very, very few. And over years, it got to be more and more people because of things like Ancient Aliens and because of those things that people complain about, of course, on the side where they're like, oh, that's just sensationalism. And so I feel like Sitchin did a good job putting these ideas out into the ethos. But at the same time, you can't just leave it there and say, well, he knew everything, but people do that. And so in the initial book, I went through and tried to look at those translations and kind of differentiate between translation versus interpretation and that. So I didn't have I wasn't on the side that I could say, oh, no, I'm an expert in ancient languages. This is what the tablet says, or what have you. I investigated Michael Heiser's work, which was phenomenal. He did a great job. However, another thing to consider when you're researching, you have to consider everybody's bias, and everybody has a bias. And it was clear after you dig really deep that Michael Heiser was an evangelical Christian, and he was always after this idea of proving the Bible, proving his view of, say, the Nephilim or this sort of thing. So even though he had a lot of great criticism of Sitchin, he was also coming from it from a particular agenda. So trying to look at all of this and figure out, is this it? Are we trapped in this like kind of binary where it's like spaceships and, metal and gold, or just demons, angels, what have you? And after I've assessed that over time, that's when I came to this new, I guess, third way that seems to sit better with me. looking at it through an anthropological lens, looking at maybe the actual data archaeologically, genetically even, and sort of trying to figure out, as someone who is interested in the occult, I guess that would be my bias too, is perhaps there's something more to this that's not just, a materialist view of things, but it doesn't mean it's just woo either. And that's what this new book's about. And it hinges on the idea that what I found was that the ancients, particularly the Sumerians, had in fact been using psychedelic substances, and using things to kind of get into different states and altered states. And, kind of pointing out that perhaps this is the way. This was something, rather than giving it the name like angels, demons, aliens, like archons, just perhaps we're looking at the same phenomena, but just every culture and time puts a different name on it.
Yeah.
So I try to, I guess, look at it at the more fundamental, I guess, position. So it's kind of what the new one's about. I also look at various artifacts too that were caught up in the looting. One of them in particular, if you've seen people talk about the wristwatches of the gods. There's a whole thing online. Yeah, they're like
There
wearing
is,
little
yes.
watches.
Watches in the
And-
bag.
Yeah. So I've actually heard people say, no, these were legit Apple watches. Like that's the whole thing. It showed that they had this advanced technology. And I'm like, look, I'm open to lots, really, too, because I believe in Atlantis. I think that there was
Of course.
another, technology and all, but just I'm not feeling the whole like these are Apple watches, right? Well, I happened to find the actual wristwatches, or cuffs as they are, and the story behind those is phenomenal and very interesting. The pictures are beautiful too, and it really speaks to something deeper about the culture, which is they were far more advanced than we even realized in terms of what they were able to do, in terms of the jewelry, the craftsmanship, and what they were depicting in those cuffs, which I argue was something called the whole gill rite, which was the use of poppy mixed with other substances to bring them to higher visions, we'll say. And then they were able to commune with their gods or their entities, who were called the Apkallu, who are depicted as birdmen. So, and it sounds like, okay, that's a whole lot, right? Kind of like a fever dream. But I go through and I discuss the real research, the evidence for that, and particularly the evidence that the archaeologists in Iraq found before they were looted, and how the evidence for that had been changed. And some subtle changes in the wording changed everything altogether. I'm not suggesting that was on purpose, and I'm not suggesting it wasn't. It's just there. And so the stories that we've been told are just not true at all, down to what we see in those images. They depicted poppies in all of their art, all of their gold. They had at this particular excavation where I'm referencing, where they found the cuffs, just to keep this in mind, it was the second largest hoard of gold ever found, second only to King Tut's tomb. Yet who's talking about that? Where's the National Geographic, shows about that? It was just gone. So that was about in 1988. And they found this, and it was the local archaeologists that actually found it. And you could imagine this was after the British university left, after the Americans left. And so you can imagine they were probably bummed about that. But they had a wonderful team that logged everything, wrote in both English and Arabic, and had pictures, and just cataloged everything and wrote about it. And that is a book that's actually available. It's like 700 pages in the University of Chicago's collection. So it's all there. It's peer reviewed. It's real. But the professor had disappeared after the invasion. It's not clear as to what happened to him. It's not clear as to what happened to a lot of things, other than the artifacts were stored apparently in bank vaults. Some of them were lost forever. Some of them were found. It's just, where is everything, right? It's those cuffs, they're not here, but there's a book that has pictures and basic archival logging of all of these different things. And they're called, where are they? Who has it? I suspect it's in private collections, of course, but when you look, it opens up a whole new view of their culture and their belief set, which was these people, they were involved in various medicinal technologies, and they had beliefs that were far stranger maybe than what we've been led to believe. Another interesting one is they had what are called the Sumerian mushroom tablets. They were literally shaped like mushrooms, and they had little writing and prayers written, kind of circling them. And what they did with those is they put them in walls of the temple, sort of like the Wailing Wall, if you put a little prayer in and do that. But these were shaped as mushrooms because it was connected to using mushrooms for psychedelic purposes. And that's how they understood they could commune with the gods through this mushroom. And so they'd make little mushrooms with their message to the gods and put that in the temple wall. And again, this is all readily available information, but so many people get stuck on Sitchin, and so many people get stuck on Nephilim and Michael Heiser and all of that. And I think it's 2026. Let's go. We got so much more going on, So yeah. So there's a lot more research, and that's, I guess what I'm trying to do now. Oh, I see. Yeah, we got some mushroom tablets. Look at that. There's one, kind of, I think. I have to click on that. Good examples are in Berlin. They have some nice ones, but yeah. So I put those in the book. But I basically in the book go through this discussion of using ways to expand your mind a little bit, understanding the difference between the Anunnaki and the Apkallu, because there's a big difference. And questioning then, well, who are these Anunnaki figures? Like legitimately. And it kind of takes us back to a great cataclysm. I'm sure people, if they're interested in this sort of thing, have heard of the Younger Dryas impact event and the timeline that falls, and how, who's to say that didn't happen and perhaps displace individuals. When you look back at the story of Noah's Ark, your first writing of that does come from the Sumerian tradition. And when you look at how they describe the event, it's spoiler alert, big differences between a boat with all the little animals getting on and riding around, and very similar but huge important differences. Like, for instance, when they describe the family, it's not a family. The original story is a collection of the civilization elites. So the top scientist, the top astronomer, astrologer, the top physician, all of that. So they get a little group together of the most important people to their civilization, and they gather all the animals of the steppe, specifically of the steppe. So what we see here is they weren't coming and grabbing up every animal all over the world to get on the boat. It was a breakaway civilization of people who wanted to continue their, genealogy, and they took with them for survival mechanism the animals of the steppe, like nomadic people would. If you take all those animals, you're able to travel far distances by bloodletting. Traditions of drinking the blood of the animal. You don't have to slaughter the animal. You can get by on their blood. You can get by on dairy. You can get by on a lot of things. So you would want a large band of people and the animals to all come along as you flee from the disaster that they were able to foresee happening because they were meteorologists and astronomers. So, but there's a lot of actual written evidence for this interpretation of it in the mainstream. And I think it's important to note that when you look at these translations, or you listen to what the Sumerians themselves had to say about who they encountered initially from the Anunnaki, it starts to paint a bit of a different picture, one that's a little more human in origin. And that often disappoints people because I think they're wanting the spaceships to land. But that's where I'm like, you know what, though? Hold on, we're getting there, because it's not to say they were just these basic, nomadic farmers or something. They brought with them a spiritual technology that was essentially magic. They were magicians compared to the semi-settled hunter-gatherers they encountered. And so they would have easily been able to be seen as gods. So it's sort of like a, I guess, cargo cult meets, and when you read it in that context, when you look at the evidence from the first point of contact, they are referred to as the black-headed ones, the people who were there at the time in Mesopotamia. So if these individuals had dark hair, then would they feel the need to designate that group by their phenotype? So that's a little, that's a clue that they look different. They were also considered to be giants. They also referred to the black-headed people as the Adama, or the red people. And that came from the word came from the redness of the soil. And it was a special type of clay that they used. It's found only in that region. It's a very particular red. Well, archaeological excavations in that region found a few interesting things. One, the bodies of those individuals were at best about reaching 5'1". So they were smaller in stature, because hunter-gatherers tend to be smaller in stature. It's kind of a rough life. And they were painted, their skulls and things were decoratively painted in a red ochre. That is the red ochre from that region. So it's not a leap to suggest that perhaps they were painting themselves red as well before they died. But I mean, that would still be speculation. But at the very least, we can say with confidence that they had dark hair and they were smaller in stature. So then if you imagine a group of individuals coming from the Eurasian steppe and descending into that region who were described as the Shining Ones. The Shining Ones, possibly because they had metallurgy, and we see evidence for early copper alloy in like Eastern Europe even. So we see evidence of a lot of firsts that we think of as being Sumerian firsts actually being as far up as like Poland. So we see this really interesting thing where you have individuals who are coming, they could be larger in stature because they have different meats, they're nomadic, they're whatever. And they're shining perhaps because they have access to metals that were not known at the time. And when you then look at how it played out in even the Sitchin narrative, these so-called gods were subjugators. And what they did is they came down and first were like agriculturalists. They enslaved the people there and said, dig our canals, irrigation, we're doing this, and you're doing it for us. There's even specific recipes known for the gods, food. So it's strange because this idea of worship, it was like working for. So rather than just say, if you think of worship, somebody may think you're just kind of getting down or bowing. But in the actual view of it in those early days, it meant to devote your life to and work for. So it was an active thing. And so these individuals were made to worship and do sacrifices. And again, sacrifices weren't just, you take an animal and you burn it and watch it and say, woo, we sacrificed. It was a shared meal. And so they were told to go get particular animals and sacrifice them very specifically to these gods. And they said, never boil them. We only want them on a brazier, which, how could you argue that? And so it's like they had specific things they wanted done, or they would be punished. So over time, you get all these myths about these gods, and these gods don't sound very moral, right? They're raping each other. They're doing all kinds of things, kind of like the Greek gods. They weren't moral figures. But you do see in the classic tale, the Promethean tale, Enki say, I kind of feel bad for these people we're subjugating, and I'm going to break away from that, and I'm going to give them wisdom. I'm going to teach them something and sort of let them in on the secret. And the big secret here, and why it's important at all, is what are the Sumerians really known for at the end of the day is it's where history begins because of the written language. So what you end up having, if you could just imagine this hypothetical scenario, is you have a group of individuals that come with their own culture, their own language, and they go to a group of semi-settled hunter-gatherers. They subjugate them. They never let them in on the language. They don't know what's going on. They have to, though, communicate somehow. So they build a priest class. Those are the scribes. Those are the individuals that are able to go as an in-between to these invaders, and also then go tell the black-headed ones, hey, if you don't do right, there's going to be some kind of an eclipse or a storm or whatever. And so you have this priest class that, as a result, obviously, like we see in any hierarchical system, gets really bloated, gets really administrative, gets really full of themselves, and further subjugates. And so you then have social stratification in a hierarchy. It does, in fact, lead to a civilization, but at what cost? But they were not allowed to breed either. with the individuals they encountered. And so they were interbreeding. But that's when you get this Enki story where, just like Prometheus, just like Lucifer, just like all of those, you have an individual that says, I'm going to go down and I'm going to teach these black-headed ones, or the Adama. I'm going to teach them what it is that we're actually doing here. And I'm going to allow them to be able to read. I'm going to give them the liberal arts, which even the term liberal arts comes from this idea. It was, you were allowed to be free. If you had this sort of skill set, which was in the Greek sense, it was like rhetoric, reading, grammar. But this idea
Trivium,
of
quadrivium.
Yes. And so it goes back to the idea that through the written word, this is how you can be free. It's magic. You can cast spells through the word. In the beginning, there was the word. The word is so important. And so all Enki had to do to free these people was to teach them language, to give them the word. And all throughout the ancient text, you see Enki being described as having this wisdom of Enki, this whole thing where later, after they had been, I guess, freed from this, or, in later iterations, the scribal class would choose to go on and maybe learn. You didn't have to, it wasn't compulsory education, but if you wanted to be a scribe, you had to go further and get degrees and work through a hierarchical system. And part of that was you'd have to write over and over again, say the Epic of Gilgamesh. And then you had to write it at these different levels, almost like at the first level, you're just repeating it. And you would be unveiling, sort of like an onion, the deeper meanings of these texts, the deeper meanings. It was also like where we get in the Bible, the idea, the passage that says, if anybody takes away from this, is going to get in trouble. Like, I think at the end of the Bible, it says that. I'm not a biblical scholar that way. I was raised Catholic, so that tells you all you need to know about my knowledge of the Bible.
Well, it's funny because you find that on the curse tablets too, when they're talking about on the tombs of these mummies, is they have a very specific way of wording it, and they use the same sentence structure in each of them. And that curse tablet motif goes all the way back up into the step. They kind of keep that with their tablets, like they go on there. So
yes, and they were told, and then they were told if anybody takes away from this or adds to it, they were going to die. It was very serious. If a scribe messed up, they would lose their hand or eventually get killed if they changed any of the words. Over time, they would learn and learn and learn until finally they were able to go up into the top of the ziggurat, where the god like Enki would actually reside. And so it was like the prototype for the Holy of Holies. And they would go into the top, and there would be an ark. And in that would be the Secrets of Enki, it was called. And what we know is that what they found in that, when they opened it, after all their years of working to be at the very top of their game as a scribe, learning all of the esoteric ideas behind their stories and everything, they would open that tablet and they would see, or they would open the ark and they would see it was the tablet. And the tablet would be the story that they had spent their whole lives writing over and over again. So it's almost like a cruel cosmic joke, but in another sense, it was something more profound. It was like, kind of a recursive truth. But we know that because that's been recorded. But the idea that Enki was the giver of the secrets and the knowledge, but through the written word, became something that was a religious viewpoint. But in the very beginning, it wouldn't be hard to see this as something a little bit different, that the fall, and of course, then you're getting into the controversial area of deifying Enki as this like Promethean Luciferian figure and saying, well, this is the champion of humanity. He freed us from things. And, and then you have that discussion. So it's like, no judgment, just looking at what the texts say. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it that way, it paints a very different picture of the Anunnaki as like a different form of contact. But then the question is, where's the weird stuff coming from, right? Because they brought in some weird stuff. And my view of that is that these invaders who escaped the aftermath of the cataclysm, they brought with them not only their sciences and technologies, but their cultural memory, their religion, their practices, and their gods as well. And we see that become something that gets differentiated in not only the text, but the motif and the artwork as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, do you think two things? Do you think that ark is then the ark that sits within the Ethiopian church that they're keeping over there? With, you know what I'm saying? How the Ark of the Covenant supposedly sits in Ethiopia?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it probably is. Whether or not it's the Ark of the
Yeah.
Covenant
Yeah.
is the question. Is it the only one?
Yeah.
Because this was a system where they had arks that had the template, the tablets generally in it. Again, kind of connecting God with the literal written word. So, and that is interesting in and of itself when you consider how important the word is, just words in general, and communication and symbols. And so that's something that I look at then, when it, like, going back to the idea of stargates, and why are these people going out there looking for these things? Are they looking for actual stargates, or are they looking for, or do they know that they're looking for something that's the word? So what would the word be? Maybe instructions on how to make that technology, instructions on how to, a formula, chemical formula for how to heal something, or how to reach a different state. The mathematical. Go ahead.
One of the consistent mysteries in Freemasonry is the unknown word of the creator. And it seems to be the same sort of motif, which is, this hidden word is the one that has all the power in it,
Yeah.
and that's the one you should seek out.
Yeah, I think that's very much connected. I think it's all connected. And that's why I ended up kind of going down a more occult road with this.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then I think what gets missed, maybe we fill in the blanks with our mind, but what's missed is that means Enki and Enlil, this Anunnaki like characters, are us from from our past that survived this cataclysm and then went back to more of the primitive people that were like remaining after the cataclysm, and then giving them this knowledge, and yet they have been like cast up as these godlike figures because of the mythologies that they knew were the only way to spread the analogy of what the technological age looked like. Is that too much?
Yeah.
Am I reading into it too much, or is that?
No, I think that's dead on. I think that's exactly the way to look at it. And when there's those weirder things that come about, when you think about the birdmen that they depict, or the pine cones, or these different things, my sense of that is that those were the belief sets and practices of those individuals. And those individuals had a mystical religion, something more shamanistic. And it kind of fits along with a lot of the world religions at that point, because they didn't all too have to go, we'll say, seed Iraq. We see these same stories in a lot of different areas coming about, where these individuals come, they bring technology. And at the end of the day, there's so many different religions that have these similar things that, again, go back to more of a shamanistic practice. So things like meditation, plant medicines, music, drum circles, all of that. So, and then of course, when people are in those states, they claim they see very similar things. They see rainbow serpents. They see these birdmen, these what are called the Apkallu. They see the fishmen, which have also been associated with the Apkallu. And those are the ones that in the Sumerian texts were described as semi-biological beings, whereas the Anunnaki were never described as semi-biological, biological, or otherwise. It just wasn't referenced. So they did point out, though, that the Apkallu were semi-biological. They could take different forms, almost like they were interdimensional. That's why I like to look at the situation and maybe a framework like John Keel as something being more ultra-terrestrial. And that's sort of the viewpoint that I have on that. And that's also why it could be when people say, well, where are the gods, now? Or it's like they never left.
Yeah.
Maybe the Anunnaki themselves, those individuals, they're all part of us, right? Genes and assimilation in time. But whatever it was that gave that technology. And this is why I've been really interested in the DMT phenomena. I've had a lot of people on my show talking about it, because when you have these particular visions, aside from just, the breaking through the veil and how similar they all are, there's something that jumped out at me, which I just can't ignore. The idea that often an entity will tell a person, come with me. I want to show you something. I want to tell you something. And often it will result in some breakthrough technologically. So
that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I just wonder, that's where I'm sitting now, is I think it's the same phenomena, and that we can reach those states through different channels. But I think that's more closely aligned with what the Sumerians ended up doing after they made contact with these displaced, I guess, climate refugees, for a more modern term, I guess.
Yeah. What's interesting is then that if you people who listen to my channel, I always bring it back to tools. So I've had my own experiences of DMT, and a lot of them in my youth, in my 20s. And what was fascinating is how Tool starts off one of their songs called Rosetta Stoned. Is he says, "Picture this, if you will," and then he goes into an experience of a man who has this entheogenic experience. And why I bring that up is because you have to understand a lot of these experiences through storytelling and narrative. And when we're trying to understand what Watson and Crick found when they understood what the DNA was and how it looked, and it looked like the caduceus, these two snakes spiraling up a single pillar, and that single pillar then, through your yogic understanding of the Shushama and the Ida and Pingala, is these snakes crawling up that single pillar. And then with all the stories that you're talking about, and then intermix that with how the Chinese internal alchemy is trying to understand that you have these dragon paths and these dragon ley lines, and you have these meridian pathways that go through the body, then for me it comes to be, these are all symbolic storytelling narratives of understanding what it takes to reach the higher ascent, so we can witness the city of the gods, as Augustine would say in his own theological understanding of what it takes to become that theurgical ascent to the divine, if that makes any sense.
No, I think that's dead on. And I think that's why it's important to look at these ancient stories, or say the ancient alien phenomenon, and all of the things that we're seeing become more and more popular through that lens, because I think that makes it a little more plausible, understandable, and probably, again, in my bias, and probably more accurate. That seems to make more sense to me than, getting on board a spaceship, flying around and doing that and whatnot. And so, you could say, well, why does it have to be either of that? It could just be that it's simply myth. It's simply myth, but myth doesn't mean a lie. Myth is a greater truth. Myth is something, much deeper than that. So I think that that it's mythic truth at the very least, and it's something we should entertain and look at more seriously.
Yeah, not even entertain, but understand it through the Joseph Campbell's lens, right? Joseph Campbell says, what is myth? Myth is but our own body trying to understand and experience itself. So myth comes from our internal understanding of what's going on with our human person.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Nice.
An interesting note on the
Go ahead, sir.
On the language tip, the Sumerians practiced a language isolate, which was different from all of their neighbors. So it was a really hard language for other people to master. The Akkadians, when they came in and took over, this was like Sargon of Akkad, they tried to keep it alive as long as they could, but they were speaking a Proto-Indo-European language, and it was not a Sumerian language isolate. But what's interesting about the language isolate angle is there were other language isolates like the Etruscans over in Italy that were practicing the same type of coloring themselves red, almost like there was this really, really ancient ritual that was shared among all these different people that had to do with this ochre and covering themselves in ochre. So it's an interesting thing, but there's a lot of similarities between the Etruscans and the Sumerians. It's really fascinating.
It is fascinating. And, what's interesting, and I don't know how much credence this has, but the use of AI in translating some of these tablets or interpreting some of the meanings behind it, because you mentioned the language isolate component, and that's really important. That's like essential. It was what Samuel Noah Kramer referred to as the Sumerian problem. The problem was, how is it that this semi-settled group of hunter-gatherers just went from that state to full-blown civilization in about 200 years, which is a historic blink of an eye, and they did so with a language isolate, that their language has no relationship to other languages in the region. So that's been what we've been told, and that's interesting. And people still try to figure out what the possible connections are with other cultures and languages. But what they've been doing now is using AI to look at that and other questions. Now that comes with its own huge set of problems, of course. But one bit of research that I did for the book, and this was early with large language models, so it was just basically fun and around. But it was pointing to a deeper connection between Sumerian and the language from the Ural Mountains, and sort of more aligned with like an early Finnish. And I thought that's strange. So I used that as a launch pad then, like almost like you should use these large language models more like Wikipedia, because they're not very trustworthy. But I used it as a launch pad then to look at the journals and see if there was anything legitimate and peer reviewed in that realm. And I did find that that was proposed as a connection before. But the idea in that case, or the explanation, was that eventually the language moved up that way, and then there were remnants of it, and then maybe somebody then came back, and it was a really blurred sort of explanation. And so I think that what that did for me was say, hey, there's potential with the new tools that we have to maybe discover new leads in this area. But again, if you know the work they're doing to try to translate the tablets, and they said they did do some, it's a little dangerous, because I followed the money on this one again. And I found that the big research program that they did a press release about and hyped about a year or so ago, had a single funder. And it was this giant, it's this giant organization that was made up of unknown figures, and they had endless money, and they were just going around giving money to different universities to run the same study over again. And it was just like, it was called the Transnational Platform. And I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe they're not nefarious. Not everything big and rich is nefarious. However, it just leads you to question when there is an agenda there, and we have the opportunity to translate or reimagine history, and we have one person kind of putting in that data point or whatever, and then it comes out from AI, and people are going to say, oh, it's AI said it, like that's, of course it's right. There's going to be a lot of concentration of power into the hands of who knows what, who's feeding the data sets. So that's my concern. I think AI as a tool is going to open up lots of potential, but we'll have to always question, who's at the helm, who's running these algorithms, because you could imagine the power you could have to sort of say all these, tablets are pointing to this, that, and the other based on our calculations. So there you go. Enough said. It's the science. It's hard science. So you'd want to believe an algorithmic hard science model over, say, a couple people doing like a qualitative analysis, because that's subjective. So I think that's why it's important to look into artificial intelligence and kind of understand its great potential, but its great hazards as well in this area.
Well, there are other factors. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think you can use it to do some good shit, but I think people, unfortunately, could also dumb themselves down, I think, with it, or become dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I did want to ask real quick, and then Heather, you can go. When it comes to like the tablets and some of the Sumerian stuff, do you think some of the imagery is actually legit, like occult symbolism, and like is not supposed to be taken at face value?
Yeah. I think it is mostly symbolism, really. Now it depends too, because they were very diligent at recording mundane things. So a lot of it wasn't necessarily symbolic. It was very much just a record keeping. But then you have the subset of tablets or cylinder seals even that are showing maybe real star maps, but then also symbolic representations. And so that's one that a lot of people discuss too, is the idea that some of the figures in these tablets are very large. Now, a traditional art historic view of that would be that was just showing that they were very important. And so maybe a ancient astronaut theorist would say, no, they were actually very large, and the people there were very small. And so these were the giants, the watchers, the Nephilim, and whatnot. So I think it's important to understand that it's a mix, that they did have factual information, but then they were also humans just like us, Homo sapiens sapiens. And a lot of times with religion and belief systems, it's very occult in its nature. And so it's artistic and it's representational that way. So I would say that those large figures were not necessarily showing giants. However, again, when you say giant, it's easy to think of Jack and the Beanstalk. If you are 5 foot, I'm 5'2". Okay. If that was the largest man in your civilization that you have going on, or your tribe or clan or family group, and everybody else is like maybe, 4'10", 5 foot roughly, and somebody comes in who's like 6 foot, 6'2", maybe 6'3", they're going to be giant. So,
oh yeah, I'm a giant among the Asians. I'm 6'3". Maybe that's a little context.
I would still be giants to me. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, so that context does matter. So I that's why I'm hesitant to get on board a lot of the giant talk about it. Like, they were probably giants, but in context.
Yeah, that's funny. I wanted to hit one more time on the DMT topic just because it's a really fascinating idea in what everyone sees as that jester-like trickster character. And the jester-like trickster character is bringing you down into or in, through the dimensions to wherever it is you're going. The DMT elves, as McKenna would talk about them. But why that fascinates me so much is because of the Fool character, or the Fool card, right? Is the 0 card, which is the beginning of the major arcana and the end of the major arcana in tarot when you're walking yourself through it, which is then it leads you into the Enki character being, and people are always talking about how Enki is the trickster of the two. And for some, when I first was getting into the Enki Enlil kind of mythos, it first is like brought to you like he's this Loki kind of character, which he's actually not as much. But there's something there on what does it mean for the Fool to lead you. You kind of have to be like William Blake says, like a fool must fall into his wisdom. You must kind of like throw everything you know about reality away so you can walk in and understand what it means to become like gods.
Yeah. No, I think that's really well said. And I think you see that then permeate cultures throughout. I think that Enki is like a template for the rest. And I don't think that's just simply because of religious syncretism. I think that it's because it's based off a very important archetype.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, that's cool. Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of interesting things when it comes to this Anunnaki question. I think it's far more interesting than if you keep it at that Sitchin level or the Michael Heiser level, and you start allowing yourself to really look at it and not be dissuaded because you see all of the hype around the ancient alien phenomena.
Well, isn't it interesting how you can throw it away as a conspiracy and then it integrates itself into the whole UAP phenomena, disclosure phenomena that's going on right now, where it's a lot easier to be all like, no, these old ones aren't like you, the Anunaki, they are different. You are but a measly slave. Go back to the grid and do your thing because, like the gods aren't you, but now we have all of these bunkers being built by the oligarchical technocratic class, and they're also trying to hide our true origin, as Graham Hancock says, like our actual birthright is amongst the stars, and that is more like going within before going without. The stars are us type of ideal.
Yeah. No, and I do think that, in fact, I know for a fact that there are individuals in the UAP disclosure camp, not the ones that you see readily on the documentaries or just out there talking on the circuit, but the actual individuals who are funding it, who on one hand look like they're very much interested in the government component and the free energy or whatever. But really what's going on is they've been hyper focused on the Enki Enlil thing, which blew my mind. Because I get people reach out to me because they see me on things and they they want to talk to me about certain things and what have you. And so, and I don't want to be, I always am hesitant to be one of those people that's like, my sources said. It's like, okay, so I'm not going to say that, because it's just like, it's just not, it's like kind of useless, but we are talking about ancient aliens, so I guess it doesn't matter. But and I don't like to completely give up certain sources, because I kind of want to, keep them as sources.
Of course.
But and sources kind of like there nothing came of this in particular, but just the knowledge that somebody who is known as the UFO philanthropist, we'll leave it at that, and people can Google that and do their own work. So I didn't say it, but that individual who is very wealthy, who funded, actually by himself funded the initial round of this disclosure movement, contacted me and was supremely focused on Enki and Enlil and the more occult and specifically hermetic views of things. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I asked some questions. We met a few times via Zoom so that I could verify, obviously, it was the person. Asked some interesting questions, had some interesting discussions. And again, it's one of those things where whether or not these things are real, it's interesting when individuals who are in positions of power and can fund things are believing certain things. And so anyone who's like, it's crazy conspiracy, sure, it could be, but it's happening. It's moving the world. It's moving the needle. So these are what people believe. So it's important that we kind of understand their thinking too. But I think it's fascinating. And again, that's why I keep pushing into this realm. I did a class on the Anunnaki, and it was like Anunnaki 101. And I was trying to do good by showing people like the real connections and whatnot. I had somebody come into the course and they were kind of giving me a hard time. Like, I don't understand what you're doing here. Why are you like mixing occult stuff with Anunnaki? This doesn't make sense. You've written about Baphomet, then you write about Anunnaki. Don't get it. I'm like, these things are intrinsically tied together. These are strange phenomena that are tied together. And I think when you start going down and looking into it more, it's unavoidable. No longer are you looking for the physical stargates or archaeological materials in that way. What you do is you start seeing these deeper connections. Art has always been made out of a sense of, trauma, and B, done to lift up the spirit. And so what we're having here in any of this archaeological material is a story about people's experiences, their phenomenology, and often tied to those deeper questions of spirituality and philosophy.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
That's fascinating.
I had a thought tied to maybe the kidnapping of these tablets. This is the Adam and Eve cylinder that was discovered in the 1800s, right? And this is sort of a cylinder seal that they would commonly use for agricultural products that are being shipped around. This is from Acadia, so it's between the period of Sumeria and Babylon. And this is supposed to depict sort of a banquet scene with right, but it's the exact sort of you've got this Adam figure with the horns. They even kind of reference that a little bit in the Bible, and you've got this Eve figure here, and they're sitting between this nice tree here with that fruit hanging down and the snake. And so it's long been theorized that this is sort of the motif that they kind of copied off of for the Adam and Eve story, as well as some other stories from the Hittites around the same time period as a later time period. But, it sort of completes the ideas here that you see in this art motif. Well, too much of these and you might lose out on your $1 trillion a year industry of Christianity. So, you got to kind of keep the lid on that. It all came from previous cultures, and it was very heavily influenced by the Sumerian sort of storylines, and Akkadian and Hittite and several other different storylines sort of feed into the Bible. And when too many people find that out, it's not really all that unique anymore. So you kind of have to keep control over those tablets and make sure that they don't get out there too much.
Yeah, that's very true. And in fact, that's what happened when they were discovered initially anyway, because some people will say it's a great conspiracy and it kind of was, but it was in the time like the Edwardian era, found by people who were very much influenced by a puritanical sort of Victorian Edwardian Christianity, and they saw these things, and the individuals that found them were scientists, sort of at the time, like early scientists, a lot of antiquarians and things, but they weren't necessarily religious or bound to that. They made a conscious decision not to go very public with it for that very reason. They didn't want people to then go and rattle themselves and start questioning the all of the Bible stories, particularly the ones in the Old Testament, because it pushed back the dates, it pushed back those narratives much further, and they were different. Some of those findings were more complete stories, like the Noah's Ark one, which goes into a more plausible, I would say, explanation than just say, a boat and every animal ever thought of and that sort of thing. So, so they just said this is for the academics, the researchers. It's a need to know basis, and at that time, people didn't necessarily have great access to public museums. That was just becoming a thing, and it really hit a much bigger point after World War I, because people were having a lot of different issues with society in the realm of socioeconomics. So people were like, hey, we went to war, we fought for this country. Why are there all these landed gentry sitting around here on their asses doing nothing? And so that's kind of where archaeology started anyway. It was a rich man's hobby called antiquarianism. And if anyone ever watched the show Downton Abbey, that's a great example of it. Highclere Castle, the actual castle of Downton Abbey, the real lord that lived there, was who funded the excavation for King Tut's tomb. And when he went and got all of that, and he brought it back to Downton Abbey and put that into his cabinet of curiosities, which was basically like a private museum is what they'd be. And all the wealthy people would come by, and the footmen would serve them drinks, and they'd walk around looking at the mummies. They may even taste the mummies because they were we know that happened for whatever reason. And so there was a lot of curiosities that way, but it could, and it was that way because they could fund it, they could travel, they could but after the war, people just were having a real distaste for anything, and things were becoming much more in public trust. So the people who are in these societies, they had a whole shift. They got ahead of it and said, okay, no, we have to legitimize ourselves, and we are going to align ourselves with scientific methods and tools, and we are going to be archaeologists, and we'll take some of our finds and we will donate them. They're on loan to museums that would now be able to be seen publicly. That's why even to this day, when you go into major museums, you may find a label at the side that says, the whatever family trust generously on loan from this trust. And they could have a 99-year agreement for that loan, but it still technically belongs to those wealthy families. But it was the way that they tried to keep themselves relevant and make the public happy. And so, that's just, I think it's something important too to point out, because mainstream archaeologists, the Flint Dibble types, people who are just like part of the cult and the machine, the large academic industrial complex, they act like archaeology is this real hard science and it's indisputable and there's this consensus, and it's absolutely not the case. You can use hard science tools and technology in the pursuit of your research, but that doesn't make it hard science. It's still subjective. It's still qualitative research. It's a soft science. I don't care how many LiDAR scans, I don't care how many, whatever you're using, it is still a qualitative study. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just important to remember that you can still have theories. You can still talk about these things, and don't let the Flint Dibbles of the world, tell you otherwise.
What, you don't like Flint Dibble? Sorry. No comment.
I love him. He's great. Yeah. He's wonderful. He just, I love how he wears his dad's suits. And,
I know exactly.
No, sorry, I'm picking on him. I know that's low. No, he's fine. He's actually exactly what you'd expect somebody from the mainstream to be. And he's right about many things. It's there's two things about it. He really is under my skin because he represents all the things that I kind of ran from. It's the credentialism, careerism, and the fact that you have to have this like poor attitude when talking about these subjects as opposed to just being there listening. One thing that really drove me nuts back in the day when I was teaching was this idea that we didn't owe the public anything. So sometimes what would happen is you'd get emails that come in, somebody found something in their yard or they had a question about a historical topic or whatever. And the common sentiment was, I'm not answering that. I don't get paid hourly like that. I'm not a consultant, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, wasn't that kind of the point? That just never sat right with me. But that kind of reminds me of, what I would imagine Flint Dibble is like. The guy that would be like, yeah, no, I don't want to have a beer with you and talk about these things. I just you have to come through my office hours and I have to tell you how you're wrong. And so he's kind of like an effigy for the rest of the whole academic industrial complex. So no real hate to him. I've never met him. I don't know him. I'm sure he's a great guy and probably likes to have a good beer. Even in his
the problem with that mentality is that it shuts off the first line of inquiry about these topics. Is if you're shutting out the public and the public are making all of the most important discoveries because it's outside of the public's back fence, then that's the person you should be talking to as an investigator of the past. But it's like it's almost become a church of the past instead of an investigation of the past.
It is. And I think that's that's what happens when you have government money. You have people who are just doing a million meta-analyses. They're not looking for real research anymore. It takes people taking risks, and a risk is really bad if you want to keep your job and lay low and have tenure. And so that's the problem. But I always think the best and most important work is done on the fringes. And so that's where I tend to be. Just think about Isaac Newton. We all know about him. He's like, the father of science, and he's just so legitimate and scientific. But like, meanwhile, he was writing on like every kind of esoteric thing you could ever imagine. And so we conveniently forget that. But that was a key to his success, is being able to expand your mind out there and sort of be able to distill it. I mean, having the tools, the sort of methodology to clarify your own thinking, to evaluate claims, to evaluate sources. I mean, you have to have that scientific method, that's a machine. But what are you feeding the machine? Feed it something, give it a crazy idea, give it something and see if it stands up. I mean, there's no creativity anymore. It's like, we're not allowed to have creativity in science. Well, that's where the good ideas start. So now we just have like a circle jerk of academics who just keep pumping out the same findings that are just useless. And it's a publishing crisis now. So Brett Weinstein has a lot of good commentary on that too. The publishing crisis is a real thing, and it's bad when it comes to our history, but it's detrimental when it comes to our actual science, biology, medical fields, and so on. So I think it's a systematic problem, a cultural problem at the moment. But I'm not pessimistic, because there's so many people out there like us talking about it. I mean, this is, the way that people are going. More and more people are looking into these topics and saying, I think I'm realizing that all our textbooks were put out by Robert Maxwell, and that doesn't sit well with me. And so,
whoa, there's no connection between Mossad and Epstein. What are you talking about?
No, who? No.
No, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because if listeners want to go back about 2 years ago, Lisa came on the show and actually covered that whole topic. Oh, and like nobody seems to like. It seems to be like a new thing now that people are starting to realize. And it's like we were talking about that 2 years ago, but it's very, if people want to go and listen, it is serious how much they ran that shit.
Oh, yeah. He just fell off of a boat. What do you mean? He just was drunk and fell right overboard.
It happens, guys. It happens. So, well, I wrote about that in the new Anunaki Revelation book, because I wanted to point that out, a couple different things about how messed up the publishing world is.
Macmillan is them?
Yeah, McGraw-Hill.
McGraw-Hill, both of them, yeah.
Yeah. And you know what's worse too is as somebody who taught, the big thing everybody did in my world was they used the tools of McGraw-Hill. So McGraw-Hill would make it real easy. They'd contact you all the time, like, and say, "Oh, you have a class coming up. Let's make it easy for you." And so if you were a professor, you could get a McGraw-Hill textbook, and then you get the plugins for it for your online class. It was a whole system where you could just pop into whatever you use, like a learning management system. And it would have the test. It would have the grading. They were using AI at the end there to do the grading. Essentially, it was a push button. And the professors it was like, they were so tempted to just say, sure, I don't have to really teach the class. I'll just pick up more money or whatever. Unfortunately, a lot of adjuncts would do that because they're not getting paid great. So they're trying to stack, the odds in their favor. And so they would just put it on autopilot. Well, all of that content was just McGraw-Hill stuff. No creativity, wouldn't even worry about academic freedom because they're not even pushing back. It's just like plug and play. So it's like Project Mockingbird, professor edition. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But very much approved.
But very much approved. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I think people should really, really look into that more about how they even, if you look at kind of like what they were doing, they even kind of dictated like what the academic community was even allowing or kind of making it look like this is where you should be looking or studying. Yeah. This is what we'll put out. I do think they actually manipulated like publications and that shit.
Oh yeah. And you know what's worst? Well, maybe not worse. It's all bad. You can't really have a hierarchy of bad on this when you're talking about Mossad and not Mossad. Who is that? No, we don't talk about Mossad. That's a fake thing. Anyway, no, WikiLeaks. When you look at WikiLeaks, years ago when that came out and everybody's looking and I was doing my search, of course, and I found something very interesting. I think I wrote about it at the time. There was a whole bunch of these WikiLeaks that were discussions between individuals in positions of power and the provost or different people in administrative capacity at universities, particularly Brown University was one that I found, where what they were doing was saying, hey, my daughter, say, is going to Brown, and we want like to publish a thesis based on a political thing. Like they wanted to have an arrangement where, say, they wanted a cultural movement to happen where they wanted to say, one thing is true or not, basically plug in some propaganda. They needed some scientific or some sort of academic bolstering for that. So they would offer to go in and do the entire work for a particular student. What the student would get in return is they could just have a party school, they could just have fun, and then eventually take credit for that and have a career. And the people in positions of power would be like, sure, great, because my kid will just this will benefit my kid. And so deals were being made. And so talk about a crisis in publishing. Deals were being made of saying, hey, I want this historical figure to be the hot thing right now. And so I need like 10 dissertations written about how great they were and whatever to help influence the movement, like metapolitically. And we'll just have all these, students that are in there just partying away and having it done. So that was all over WikiLeaks. And I thought, well, nobody's talking about that too. I don't know. Everything's been a lie. So it's even hard when you're looking at, peer review research. It's like, always question who's paying for stuff. What are just keep questioning. Breakdown of authority is real. So we just have to double down on the questions.
Yeah. Why do we have got milk in the 90s? Why are they spreading trans fats for, I can't believe it's not butter, all the way into even Hollywood. They're like propping up screenwriters and directors who are basically just last names of big bloodline families who have no real worth and creativity. And they just make these shitty things. It's like, oh God, it makes me want to ram my head through a wall.
Yeah, no, it's real bad. Definitely, definitely in a control grid. But yeah, and I think it's the same sort of Anunnaki control grid, which sounds kind of clickbaity, but at an abstract level, I think that's right. I think it's the same forces at play in our world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because then you get the dichotomy of, I think the hope comes from when we understand that Lucifer, like when I was talking to Peter Gray and Alkistis about the John Milton's Lucifer and that whole figure, that rebellious nature, that fire, that Enki, and if Enlil is the control grid and Enki's the rebel trying to be like, hey, everybody, no, we are you. Now just raise your consciousness, do these practices, get away from all the narratives, get out of the cave, right? To Plato's cave reference. That's where the hope lies, is that if we all have the same spark of divinity and we can have this anagogic understanding of that theurgical rising up of our consciousness into something else, that's how we break the system. It's not from doing whatever is happening in our day and age right now, where it's like social unrest and protest. That's not how you break. That's how the control grid gets in place even more. Right? It's like fascinating how people don't understand such a simple concept.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. You're feeding that machine,
Yeah.
when you're doing that. We need to break away from it. And so, but it has us right now. It has us, and I don't know where it's going, but it's really something to see.
Yeah. Do you believe then that, I guess through either your research or whatnot, do you believe that the elites are doing a breakaway civilization, kind of like a Joseph Farrell talks about in his work, and that there is somewhere else that the money's being put into? Catherine Austin Fitts also talks about it in her work.
No, I do. I 100% think that that's what's going on. And I think that's, I think it is tied into this sort of Anunnaki narrative, for lack of a better word, but that idea of the same thing happening over and over again, that they understand that there's something coming, that whether it's like a pole shift or who knows what, that they understand that there is some sort of cataclysm that's on its way back, and they're getting prepared for that. And I think that's why you're seeing a huge breakdown in all of the different things, whether it's like, just politically, economically, et cetera. It's a massive transfer of wealth and resources so that they can have everything at the top, so that they think they can ride this out. And they do. They're, going underground. I really think that all signs point to them trying to ride this out in some way. And I think that they believe that they're entitled to this because they are the ones who are knowledgeable about our true past, and they embrace it, and they're allowed to feel entitled to survival, entitled to those resources, and even have a little noblesse oblique to say, oh, but it's our obligation to save culture and society and humanity. And so I don't think the idea of us going off world was ever really real to them.
Yeah.
I get the sense that the idea of Occupy Mars and all of that was never about going off world, but rather going underground, writing it out that way. So I think somebody, I can't remember who was talking about this, but it might be interesting to Google for anyone who's interested, the Mars program, the military, I think it's military auxiliary radio system, if anyone's familiar with that. So that being how, if there was a contingency, like a continuity of government plan, where we would have to have that level of communication somehow so that individuals could ride this out. And so there's the work that's been done on that. I don't know if Joseph has done that work. He might have, but that's something I've been looking into more and more lately, is trying to learn more about the continuity of government plan that I think Catherine Fitts was talking about, essentially with her underground bases. But that is it. I think that's a lot of what we're going to now. I also, though, from my personal research, know that chaos is a big part of this. Chaos magic in particular. There are people who are heavily into the new version of chaos magic, things that like Peter Carroll and stuff. Had written about, and then have taken it and applied it to a geopolitical framework. And so I would highly recommend the book War for Eternity. It's don't let it fool you. It looks really dry because it's about Steve Bannon, and it's sort of like, okay, but don't let it fool you, because it's about the occult and his interest in the occult and individuals who are And I always recommend this book. I really haven't, the professor who wrote it did such a good job with it because he didn't show his bias very much at all. He just really, he was an anthropologist and ethnographer, and he goes into these circles and studies them and writes about it. And it was just fascinating, but he did a very good book. And the reason it came to my, into my framework was because we had shared sources in the occult world. And all of those mysterious sources that I kind of sort of drop sometimes. I saw somebody on the Danny Jones podcast talking about a source. He called him the Londoner. It was Jason Giorgiani. So he was on there talking about this guy, and I was like, huh. And then I heard him talk about this guy more and more, and I'm like, the Londoner. Oh, wait, I know who this is. And so I contacted Jason, and I was like, I think we have a mutual friend in the Londoner. And then we connected and went back and forth on Signal and found out, yep, it's the same people. And then I was like, wait a second. And all things collided. And then it was like, okay, so highly recommend Jason's work too. Now, whether you are interested in his political viewpoints or not, irrelevant. It's look at what he's saying about the UAP phenomenon. It's just look into that information. And you will find that there are people in positions, high places, who are doing some very interesting things and using a lot of chaos magic and other forms of magic for these new political purposes. Whether or not you want their ends or you believe in what they're saying or not, again, irrelevant. It's just important to know so that you have the whole picture. So highly recommend that book, War for Eternity. Yeah, it's all about the occult. So great book.
Nice.
Yeah. And I can attest to all of the things that it was said in that book, 100% true. So I would love to talk to that professor. I don't know if he'd talk to me or not, but
who's the author?
Good question. What is his name? I want to talk to him. Ben, is it Ben Teitelbaum? Benjamin Teitelbaum.
Great.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, definitely want to get him and talk to him. But because I was thinking about this once. I was like, I got all these people I'm talking to and these different things, and I should write some sort of book about it, but I don't know. I don't want to give up my sources necessarily because I haven't really gotten everything like from it. And I thought maybe I'll write a Dead Man's Trigger or something like that. And then all of a sudden I find this book and I'm like, oh, I don't need to do that. It's already right here. Never mind. They're like, thanks, Ben. Save me the hassle. But that's why I definitely recommend the book. But
awesome. There's a connection I want to make just for the audience as well as everyone is that Philip K. Dick writing the book. The movie. I'll say Total Recall, right? You can buy for it wholesale or something like that is what the short story is. But it's very similar to exactly what you're talking about with the Occupy Mars, get off world, or moving civilization elsewhere. And then so most people probably know Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. The whole idea of going to Mars, but not doing it physically, doing it through virtual reality, and not even virtual reality, but then implanting the memory that you went to Mars within your very psyche so that you think you went to Mars, and then you really don't. There's something to that within the cultural zeitgeist with meta virtual reality and moving everything into this blockchain-like reality that we're moving into without most people even knowing it. And so it's all like you don't even have to go to Mars. You just have to plant the memory that you were in Mars, and that can be a whole new world of like Ready Player One style world where it's like we get everyone away from real physical touch, intimacy and community. And if we can make people believe they're doing things that they're not, then we on the side can, the global elite can be doing what they're doing, ramping up for this global cataclysm.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. It's something I've been looking into lately. I've been really interested in that GATE program. Talk about that, but in relation to in relation to the phenomenon that people are talking about, mostly on TikTok, I think for a bit, about mall world. Did you ever hear of that? The mall world phenomenon? Mall world kind of blew my mind because people were going on and talking about a place that they've all been in their dreams. It's a highly specific place, right? And usually these things are, just trends on TikTok. Everyone's just copying each other. But the thing that got me was that they were describing exactly my recurring dreams that I don't ever really talk about. I don't ever really, because they're weird. It just doesn't even matter in real life, but it's very specific. And they're describing this, and some girl even like made a map. She drew it out, this whole realm. And it's called Mall World because it sort of resembles like a 1980s shopping mall / airport / school / YMCA. I don't know. It's really strange, but it's very specific. Very specific. Like if you say you go through this airport like structure, take a left, and then you'll find a locker room, take a right, and you'll find filthy bathrooms and like very specific things. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Because it's very lucid dreaming, right? And I'm not I don't usually experience things. I'm not an experiencer. And I wouldn't think of these dreams as experiences because they're very mundane. They're just like what you're walking through like an airport. And I mean, who doesn't dream of that? But they have a certain flavor and they're recurring, and I've had them forever. Well, apparently a lot of people have. So people have been getting together, drawing maps, talking about this place, and then talking about its relation to the GATE program. And then talking about Robert Monroe, or the Monroe Institute's Hill, if you're familiar with that. So the location where if you kind of meditate and find each other on the hill, that this hill has a place in the small world. So I've been like asking people about this, like, what are your thoughts on this? Have you experienced anything like it? And when I was researching a little bit, I was talking to somebody who is deeply involved in Freemasonry. He was telling me about, a practice in some lodges traditionally where you would build like an interior lodge. You'd build this lodge through these different, crafts, and it would be a place that, people could meet. So it would be like a virtual, like I guess a etheric lodge. And
you call it an astral temple.
Yes, an astral temple. And so then I came across a couple people, and so I've been working this out, trying to figure this out, of course, behind the scenes, talking to people in different states of initiation, scientists, DMT experts, everybody. And the going theory hypothesis right now is that perhaps, just perhaps, they were experimenting with imposing an astral temple creation onto maybe, or like seeing if they could do that to people, and maybe doing it through the GATE program, maybe doing it that way, planting ideas, somehow doing it without anyone's consent. And that's why it looks like very boring 1980s, 90s style facilities, things that could have been, contemporary at the time that this happened, and representing something that would be very, I guess, benign and not necessarily something people would talk about until they did. So just a little wacky,
that's crazy.
Little wacky conspiracy theory there,
but
but
that's not wacky at all. That's Philip K. Dick. He writes about both those things in both the books, Ubix and Three Stigmata for Palmer Eldritch. And it's the idea that everyone is already dead and they are but it's like they're on their last lifeline, and we're all stuck into this matrix-like pod-like system where our consciousnesses are all experiencing itself through this makeup of people on the outside who are trying to keep people alive until these last moments. I'm trying, and seeing if they can bring them back from the dead or not. And obviously Philip K. Dick is all about trying to ask the question, what is reality? What is human nature? What is human experience? And what is death and what is real, And so it's one of those, it's very similar to that. On another side note, I want to bring up, there's a Chinese donghua, which means basically an anime. There's a Chinese story. It's first written as a web novel by a guy by the name of Cuttlefish Who Likes to Swim. That's his pen name. The actual story is called The Lord of Mysteries, and you can head over to my YouTube channel. I've started breaking it down episodically, but what that's all about, it's a steampunk eldritch H.P. Lovecraft isekai transmigration story where somebody gets transported from one world to the next. And why I'm bringing this up is because the main character has the ability of the Fool, this godlike being who he goes into his own astral temple, which then is connected to more of like a common space astral temple where he can bring other people who are mystics and magicians who are meditating across the globe, and they are all doing ritual. And when they bring that ritual ritual in, he can feel it, and he pulls their souls and their spark into this round table, where then each one of them take on a certain archetype from the major arcana. It's fascinating, and it really sounds like a better version, like not trying to control you version of everyone trying to understand the social conspiratorial nature of the universe and what are these higher powers trying to do to us type of thing.
Wow.
So that's in the world zeitgeist right now in our Why Magus in the media, right? It's in the thing that we're all doing, slight plug. But it's really fascinating how we're being shown these symbols and signs, like you were bringing up early in our conversation, that is telling us something's going on with consciousness. And there are these messages and symbols that are being shown to us if we can become initiated into the esoteric, into the magic of the world, and or not, and then you're just going to be fucking flown off to virtual reality Mars land in some kind of gateway mall dimension.
You said Mars, just for the record. You said it. So Joe McGonigal back in the 80s, he did this Mars 1 million BC remote viewing, where he was sort of tricked into going to Mars on a remote viewing, which he didn't want to do. He only wanted confirmation, that stuff that could be confirmed. So he wasn't into doing Mars or other planets like the rest of the remote viewers were at that time. And he was just like, okay, well, I'm here. And he starts describing this place, and he's got a bunch of pictures from the orbiter spacecraft of Mars that looks exactly like the place that he was supposed to be remote viewing, which he got from JPL for some reason. They gave it to him. And he had this experience where he was seeing these people sort of stuck under this pyramid, and they were all kind of in this suspended animation dreamlike state, waiting for people to get back. And so you've got Mars 1 million years BC, you've got this sort of mall dream idea. It's this liminal space where people are like stuck in a space where they move between one area to the other. Are we back to Plato's cave?
Exactly. That's exactly nailed it. You nailed it. That headless genius. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And John Carter, right? The movie, which is actually stems from The Princess of Mars, or what that writer. Yeah, great movie. It didn't get a lot of hype, but the book itself, the guy who wrote that book, he was an occultist and magician. So it's really interesting how these things keep coming up in the occult zeitgeist. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I do think it has to do with remote viewing too. I think that's a huge component of it, at least perhaps if the GATE program was a ruse to get people involved in building some sort of a, astral temple.
Robert Monroe that fooled him into doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Robert Monroe, he was the handler for that 1 million year BC. And he says, well, I don't want to do anything that we can't confirm to keep it on Earth. And so he's, Robert Monroe was fooling him into doing something that probably he did himself and wanted some confirmation on.
Yeah. So look into Mall World for anyone who's not. I think it died down as a little trend on TikTok, as those things do, but it was a little spooky because I had experienced that, and like I said, I'm not usually a real experiencer in much. And when I saw these people talking about these places and the things that happened, I was like, "Oh hell no, I'm scared now." I had chills. I was like, "What?"
Another fascinating connection is back to that DMT thing, is that when I was deeply into my entheogenic use, and I had this never-ending little baggie of DMT, it's that fascinating is I was doing all my magical practices, studying philosophy academically, as well as doing this thing, is that though it started to wear down the boundaries between my dream world, my DMT experiences, and my everyday life, which was really fascinating. Thank God I had an actual grounded studying philosophy, and an actual grounded magical practice and Kung Fu practice, because anybody else, it can drive you crazy if you don't have those boundaries. And so I think the line between our dream world and our reality is so like a gossamer's web that we don't truly understand. Understand that.
Yeah, well, it's like that, people often cite that study that was done early with the fMRI, watching their brains while they were on a psychedelic. They initially thought that they would see everything light up, like it'd be wild and crazy. And they found that, no, it actually shut things off, which kind of leads you to wonder, more about those theories that discuss how we're creating our reality as we see it, that most of our brain is meant to lock things out so
Yep.
that we don't go crazy, because it would be overwhelming if we were able to see all of the things or sense somehow all of the things that may actually be around us. So it's like, our brain is putting necessary boundaries on us so that we can navigate our environment. And that's what it is. So then the question is, what is our environment? Is it limited to our five senses or not? So yeah, I think not.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So lots of wild things. I think we talked about a lot of cool things. I really love this. But you asked me in the beginning, have you heard the show? And I'm like, oh, unfortunately, I don't really tune in.
Okay.
And now I'm like, what have I been missing? This is like this is great. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I'm like, serious. These are really great conversations.
Oh, I had a blast.
Because they go deep too. So it's not just superficial. It's like really awesome. So it's a lot of fun. And you got a great audience too. And I recognize some people
they're definitely
too.
digging it. Yeah. No, we
It's
definitely
like-
do have a good live crew. I do enjoy the people that check us out live.
Isn't that's so that when we talk about all of these somewhat pessimistic things about how the world's just falling apart and everything, it's those types of interactions and the recognition that people are actually tuning in, they're interested, they're thinking, that makes me feel kind of hopeful. And also the young people too. Shout out to Zoomers. A lot of people pick on them, but I've had students who, are in that age range, and they are like so not about it. They're awake to a lot of things, and that's the newer generation that I think for everybody's faults, I think that we're in good shape if we can make it, of course, and we don't hit a cataclysm. But 2030, I think that's the date everyone's pushing out there for a cataclysm. 2030, yeah. So I don't know. I'm sure you are, but have you read any of the Adam and Eve story? Not the biblical version, but the CIA documents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's wild. So I think we're due for another cataclysm. So
yeah. So do magic and learn kung fu. That's what I tell everybody.
There you go. Kung fu, love it. Yeah, definitely.
I know kung fu.
Yeah, exactly.
Matrix.
Yeah. Definitely
would love to.
Nice.
Yeah. We'd definitely love to get you on in the future to come back, even maybe for your Baphomet book. So.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. Definitely, lots to talk about Baphomet. That's a big one.
Yeah, whole nother rabbit hole.
Whole nother rabbit hole with Baphomet, and I found some interesting things lately too about that. So I'll have to, when we do talk about that, I'm going to have to tell you the part that that I have to take back actually, and that's the part that most people talk about, which is the Taxial hoax. Which I have a book, Evil Archaeology. I touched on it there because it's just one of these like known things, so to speak. That Taxial hoax. It was a hoax about Baphomet, and there's a whole lore and story there. But I did some research into Edward Waite and his book, Devil Worship in France. Yeah. And he kind of looked into the Taxial hoax. And I was like, okay. So, but I happened to be, I was a museum director at a church that used to be the church James A. Garfield, the president, actually preached from. So it was just a local history museum, but it was held in this like church that was a historic site, and it was a mess. That's why I was brought on to try to help it out and get it kind of up to standards. So they had nothing cataloged, and I went in their library and they had a huge Masonic collection because James A. Garfield was a very important figure in Masonry, and it meant a lot to him. He was he did some important things there with particularly like Euclidean math. And so long story there, but overall I found his collection of these books, and I'm looking through these beautiful old books. And I found the one thing that the Taxial hoax has been used to sort of contest is the existence of the Palladian Order of Freemasonry, as though that's not a thing. It was just sort of like a fanciful tale. And I'm like, all right, sure. Edward Waite said so. Everybody said so. So fine. Well, according to some very, very old books, Masonic books from the Lodge of James A. Garfield, that the Palladian Lodge was real and accepted, and it was an androgynous group, and they were doing a whole lot of different things. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the other things that Taxio was claiming was true or otherwise, but it just gives you a moment to say, wait a minute, what is this? Why were they hiding this? What's going on? And so that was another bit of research that I've opened up. So I can't actually say now the hoax was a hoax, probably because it was very nutty. You know, the accounts were firsthand accounts of so-called like devil worshiping Freemasons who were so ravished by the devil, they were like losing their eyeballs and they were gaunt, and it was like penny dreadful stuff. So that's clearly hoaxy, but just the fact that they denied there being such an order, denied that it had anything to do with androgyny, and then could be associated with Baphomet in the sense of this sort of abstract notion of the androgynous figure. Lots more maybe philosophical things there, and dates, names, places, and people. I'm like, wait, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Whether or not it comes out anything, I don't know. I've been talking to my friends who are in different lodges in different areas that might have something to say on it. Been trying to go down that and figure out what's going on, because something's going on if they've denied that even existed when it was just like basically a footnote in history. So I'm like, what's the significance of that? So we'll see. I don't know, but we'll have a lot to talk about when Baphomet comes up, because Baphomet is controversial, exciting, and very misunderstood.
Oh, very misunderstood.
Totally. I think so too. Yeah. So definitely look forward to that. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That was an awesome chat. That was an awesome show. I'm finally happy we got you on. Can you please let everybody know again where they can find your stuff?
www.drheatherlynn.com. My new book, Anunaki Connection, is going to be out Tuesday. You can order it now, or you can wait till Tuesday and order it then. It's out everywhere. Also, I'll be speaking as a keynote with Nick Pope and others at ObscuraCon 2026 in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, July 23rd. And that will be fun. I'll be talking about the confluence of demons, aliens, other entities. Are they the same phenomenon? And I'll also do a workshop on learning cuneiform, where you'll actually get to make a cuneiform tablet. So
that's cool.
It'll be a lot of fun. Look, it's gonna be a really great event, and looking forward to it. So if you're in that area or you want to fly out, come see me and say hi. We have a lot of great speakers. So, but otherwise, and I look forward to coming on again and talking to you guys. This was really great. I appreciate it so much.
No, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you making the time.
Oh, thanks. Anytime.
And Headless, real quick, let everybody know what's up with you, please, sir.
You can find my channels on YouTube, on X, and on Instagram. I occasionally post over there too. So check me out. I've got a show coming up tomorrow with Nick about the mailbag. So definitely send those occult/weird experiences. If you've had a mall dream, send them to me at the headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and I will read those on the show. Thank you.
You remember that was a thing? We actually did get like 1 or 2 in. Yeah. We had mall dreams.
Yes, we did.
Crazy.
Yeah. Brandon, please let everybody know what's up.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Heather Lynn. That was fantastic. I can't imagine that could have gone any better. That was amazing. Everyone, make sure to, after this, head over to Magus in the Media at YouTube. That's where I'm putting all my long form, all the things. Live stream tonight, Plato's Cave. We're in it. Can we figure out the shadows on the wall? I'm going to be going through a bunch of different clips that I find fascinating that prove that we are still just looking at shadows on the wall. I'll break down what Plato and the cave and the Republic are actually talking about. It's a long conversation, so there'll be many things on that. Also, make sure to check out, I just did Scarlet Imprint. That is out now on my channel. They are fascinating. They are amazing, and they are beautiful people, and that talk was amazing. Head over to my Instagram, follow, do the thing, and my X. I'm actually boycotting TikTok, so you know what? Screw them. And so, yes, thank you, Nick. As always, the Occult Rejects are blowing minds on a continual basis. Nick is slowly taking over the YouTube world. I don't know. But yeah, so everybody subscribe, like, and share to all of us, Headless, me, Occult Rejects, and buy all of Dr. Heather Lynn's books. She's brilliant.
Oh,
thank you so much. I really appreciate that, bud. Yeah. And again, thank you, Heather, and thank you both of you for making the time, and everybody in the chat. That is what's up. That's where we go live. I appreciate everybody stopping by. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.